Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Human. I'm Joe Klemczewski with Jeff Stuckey, and we're going to start a new series on marriage. I feel a little bit less prepared for this one, Jeff. I think I'm going to have to defer to you for most of this.
That would have been
I thought,
useful before we started recording.
well, I thought it
Like,
was okay with the masculinity section
I just
because,
make up some shit.
right, that's what I'm going to do. Absolutely. I do
Cool.
have some stats. I have some notes here, so
All
we
right.
will go through that. But you, as a mental health therapist, I think you would say you have specialized in marriage and family therapy, at least for a bulk of your career. So, tell us what's different about marriage now than maybe when you started your clinical practice, because I hear a lot and I see a lot of stats that are changing, and I've heard some different theories proposed in terms of why it may be more difficult to sustain a marriage now. But what have you seen in your career?
I would say the start of my practice began kind of this new wave, if we'll call it, where still it was very, conventional marriage. It was till death do us part. But there was certainly starting to be an uptick in divorce. And, there was a pejorative phrase, starter marriages had just it very had not been accepted, was still kind of a controversial, like, wait, what the fuck? Like, um, divorce was still largely viewed through religious lenses. We were probably still more of a theistic orientation, at least, by default. Nothing had overtly replaced it. So there was still kind of that religious obligation, very much a scarlet letter for those that had been divorced, and you're fucked and you've just fucked up your children beyond repair. So um, that was still very heavy-handed. Um, Now, uh, it's more commonly divorced than not divorced. And what is it? I think the last time I checked was 56% of marriages ending in divorce, to the majority ending in divorce. Um, it's interesting the shift that I have seen. Uh, the things that bound husband and wives together, um, largely, not in all cases, but in many cases, don't bind them together anymore. You have professional women who have an income and an identity outside of. Um, I'm not saying that that is a negative thing at all, but it's a different element to be navigated, you know. I mean, she's working full time, he's working full time. Are the expectations that she comes home and still, cooks and cleans and all of these different kinds of things? So some of the domestic responsibilities and assumptions, and there's there's not an imperative to stay married anymore. It's it's much more of a, once this gets boring, this is an oversimplification. So you feel free to take exception with it, but I don't have to stay. And once this gets boring, I can I can go do something else. And fortunately, one of the upsides is the stigma for children is not nearly what it used to be. It's, I don't know, just a collateral effect that, yeah, Joey's parents are divorced. It's the divorced kids are not whispered about anymore, don't have the assumptions of being, somehow flawed or broken. Does that mitigate all of the other things? I don't know. But it is much better for a child in this day and age to grow up in a divorced family without all that stigma.
I do have a story about that I will bring up later, but I agree. You and I were talking more anthropologically before we went on camera. and I am a biology first guy. And so I immediately went to what you described, the incentives for marriage. One psychologist I listened to brought up the fact that as a religious institution, marriage did not even become at least a Catholic Church sacrament until about the 16th century. So we had to kind of define this, but all the way back archaeologically, we already saw a division of labor and mate selection and the kind of traditional bonds that we have brought forward. And it's kind of obvious why, if you just think in those biological terms, the men were out hunting and you see evidence of that, and the women who are childbearing and they have the oxytocin and all the bonding neurochemistry to take care of that child. Again, with probable genetic exceptions and personality traits even back then. But you bring that forward, and as societies became more structured, now you have people coming together. You can look at Sumeria as the first ancient culture we know of, besides maybe in the Americas, the Aztecs and Incas and so forth, Mayans. All of a sudden you have to create more rules and more boundaries and even laws because now we're all together. So this is my sheep, this is my goat, this is my wife, just another piece of property. And there was incentive for her for protection and provision to stay there. But now, as you said, some of the stats I think that we can kind of build a platform on are not only do over 50% of marriages end in divorce now, but why in the 1950s was it only 20%? Why in the 1950s did the average couple get married at age 20? Now it's around 30. And as you said, about 10% more women than men, 47% of women, 37 for men, graduate from college. Women are now up to about 50-50 in managerial roles. So for somebody to say, I need an incentive to stay in this marriage, that used to be one-sided. The other one was just kind of held captive. And so that creates an entirely different social dynamic. And I wonder how that translates into the problems couples come to you in counseling when they're trying to figure out, are we getting divorced or are we not? Is this therapist Jeff Stucke going to help us, or are we heading to court? What problems do they actually bring to you that are part of that milieu?
I think part of it is I the expectations, maybe more the subconscious contract of marriage, of a man's role and a woman's role. Um, Not defending them, but I'm saying, and again, I would say on a subconscious level, have not effectively evolved. And there is still, and I'm not indicting anybody. I'm saying the ethos of the couple. I think some of these things are still kind of in the blueprint, so to speak, that the expectations are that the woman, even though she works a 40-hour work week, maybe even makes more money than the man, and oftentimes the case, is still running the kids around and doing the laundry and, these sorts of things.
Statistically, that's very true.
Yes. And so the way that that translates in my office is a woman that's just understandably fucking exhausted, feels completely taken for granted, and a almost a taking care of an additional child, and which fosters a sense of contempt. And even though every case, we're painting with broad strokes here, I'd say that accounts for a significant amount of the cases, that dynamic to some degree. And the husband, and this is not a slight on men, is largely aloof. Doesn't Either one doesn't have an awareness of this ethos and doesn't like seek to levy the playing field, so to speak, or doesn't really know where to, doesn't know where where they should jump in more and assert themselves. And that oftentimes, Joe, can be aggravated by the unrealistic expectation that the woman maintains. I should be able to do all of these things. And it's like, I ain't fucking gonna be pregnant for 9 months, have a child, and do like fuck that, man. It's like, so when I describe those dynamics, again, I want to emphasize the subconscious ethos of the relationship. I don't think there's anything nefarious. I'm not always in a large number of cases. I don't think there's anything particularly nefarious afoot. It's just a lack of recognition. Then oftentimes, as you might imagine, that recognition then creates a power struggle in the relationship. And once there's locked in that power struggle, then they're just stuck.
So I have a couple friends who fit this archetype for modern marriage dissolution. And it was I'm sure there was some conflict, but it ended up being amicable, but it was the female saying, look, I make more money than you. I'm working more hours than you, and yet I'm doing 75% of the domestic work. And they just decided, I don't need you. Like you said it perfectly. I don't need another child. I wanted a life partner. And they just divorce. And now all of a sudden they even tell me now, we are better as co-parents than we were as spouses. I have seen other people, though, like rise to the occasion. I see men who recognize the equality shift and they pitch in more and they do more. And I see those marriages work well. So I think that is one of the major stresses. One of the other ones goes back to anthropology. It is a huge and growing um, theory that we just expect too much in a marriage. First of all, until the last 100 or 200 years, our life expectancy was about 35 years old. You lived long enough to foster a couple children and then you died, and hopefully they could do the same before they got eaten by a tiger or died of smallpox. So now all of a sudden we have these sophisticated lives of, hey, we have this household and we're raising children and where are we going to put them into school and all these things. And by the way, we're going to save for retirement and we're 95 years old. We hope to be rocking together on a porch somewhere. And now a lot of psychologists and sociologists are saying, look, you cannot expect your partner to do everything. We used to have these very complicated familial structures, extended families, and so forth. Now we're more insulated and insular, and we expect our spouse to be everything, our best friend, our lover, our therapist, our co-parent, our, managing partner of the household. And we're just kind of getting on each other's nerves. We're not individuated quite enough.
Would say that that would be equal for the relationships that then navigate, that first ethos of how do we differentiate roles. I would elevate it to expectations are nonsensical. I mean, it's just ridiculous. First of all, that in either of you are going to be a full-time professional, parent of the year, sit down on the couch and do your Gottman exercises, and then go have magical sex every night. It's like, on what fucking planet? Like the expectations are absurd. It's like we take the cues more from a Hollywood rom-com than we do anything that would be even close to reality. And it's like, yeah, you get bored with each other, you get irritated with each other. The most difficult balance in the marital relationship is maintaining enough autonomy that I know who I am, and my partner has enough autonomy that she knows who she is as an individual, while creating enough overlap that we feel connected. And when you don't have margins anymore. And Joe, we haven't even thrown in the fucking deification of our children, and they have to be in every goddamn activity from the time they're 3 years old until they graduate college. And most of them aren't going off to college now. They're just living in their parents' basement. No fucking wonder you've been like coddling them for this long. I mean, it's like what I mean, if you and oftentimes I'll write out with a couple just what they do in a week's amount of time. And it's like, well, fuck yeah, you're tired, you're frustrated, and you're taking it out on each other. Ta-da. Like and it's like when you try to be prescriptive of there's so much insecurity and frustration in the relationship at that point. It's like you two motherfuckers need to spend less time together. Oh my goodness. What it's like, you know what I'm saying? They're at a level of defensiveness now where, and in
Are you describing the therapy you did with my wife and me?
possibly,
Pretty sure that was the exact script.
it's like get to know each other. I'm not afraid of physical separation. I often prescribe physical separation because it's like, you're symbiotic at this point. You two are so enmeshed in your roles and responsibilities that you don't even know who you are as individuals anymore. And as Gottman said, once contempt enters into a relationship, divorce is next. And it's like you two need to get the fuck away from each other and get over that insecurity and anxiety of being away from each other, because it's a toxic little thing. It's a toxic connection. It's not a healthy connection. And then we can reintegrate your relationship back together. But insecurity and defensiveness is so elevated at that point that it's like, what are you just trying to get us divorced? It's like, fuck no, I'm trying to save your marriage. Like, did we not just go through that? And so once they get to a place where they're in my office, the resentment and the insecurity and all of those kinds of things just churning together, man, it ain't fucking easy.
I'm laughing because that was literally our first argument in your office. You may not even remember, but you did that whole thing with us. And you said, Here, Joe, here's how you guys are, and you need to be like this. And I said, Oh my gosh, no, we're like this. We're like in different solar systems. And you said, No. And you had to explain the whole concept of individuation. But I think Esther Perel probably started this whole conversation with her book, Mating in Captivity, and the whole precept that you just can't be everything to each other. But listen to this quote by classic author Kurt Vonnegut. Is that it? Vonnegut? Um,
Vonnegut. Kurt, yes, lay us some Vonnegut.
have you heard this quote?
I don't know, but I'm a
A
huge fan of Kurt.
Okay, so a marriage therapist laid this down talking about the same topic. Pretty insightful for just an author. Most of us, if we get married nowadays, are just one more person for the other person. The groom gets one more pal, but it's a woman. The woman gets one more person to talk to about everything, but it's a man. When a couple has an argument nowadays, they may think it's about money or power or sex or how to raise the kids or whatever. What they're really saying to each other without realizing it is, you are not enough people. So we just keep shoveling these hopes and expectations onto each other. And as you described, we probably need a little bit wider sphere of influence and not rely on each other for quite as much. Are there models for this kind of relationship that you see that you could point to that people might know?
Like successful.
Yeah, just they obviously love each other, they're connected, but they have these different lives, and you might predict like they're just not close enough to stay married, but that's kind of what makes it work.
Um, I, I, yes, and what's ironic about that is that they're close, right? The function of their life, the way that it works, because of okay, she's at work and he's at work, and who's picking up this kid and who's picking up that kid and that sort of thing. It's like I'm not even really changing the structure very much. I'm trying to change the ethos of your relationship so that we can start to, like, you're not clinging to each other out of this anxiety generated by unrealistic expectations, but you get back to a space where it's like I like that person. And I'm kind of an asshole, as you well know. I mean, I don't when people come to me for marriage therapy, it's like it's not a talk about your feelings session. It's your marriage is broke. Do you want me to fix it? And I'll ask my clients, how committed are you? Like, are you 1%? Are you 10%? Like, give me some level because I'm not going to work harder at this than you're willing to work, and they're typically like, oh, 100%. It's like, you know, okay, really? Like, you're 100% committed to this. And and the reason that I do that is because I'm going to ask them to do some difficult, very scary things. And I'm going to say, I thought you were 100% committed to this. And I do a pretty good job of taking the reins in the beginning of the process, letting my clients know this is how this is going to go. And 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 some people don't like that. They're like, you're as big a dick as everybody says you are, which is fine. Go cluster with those people. But then when it comes time to really navigating through that process, it's like, I can get you through this process. I've had pretty good success with that, and I've had great results. And I've had, I think one of the most rewarding things, and I think this is true of you and Tracy, by no means taking credit for it, but it's like when a couple discovers authentic friendship again, like and when that rediscovery happens and they are able to look back over their marriage cooperatively, God, we got through some hard fucking shit together. That is magic, dude. That's
Yeah,
fucking magic.
I'm living it.
And then the dopamine and shit, and then they want to fuck each other, and wanting to fuck your best friend is that's a cool deal, man. That's a cool deal.
So let me back you up a second because I want to dive headfirst into what you just said. We had seen a therapist previous to you, and she said something, couple things that I thought were equally powerful. And we ended up with you because I think just the process of even being in therapy was scary enough for Tracy that she just was not committed to that process. She was going in very resistant. But at one point, this therapist said to me, "Are you checked out?" And I didn't know what she meant, but I kind of did because it was so profound. Like I thought I was able to hide that. Like I thought that was an inside thought. And she looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Are you already checked out?" And it startled me. And I had to say no because I really wasn't, but I was on the edge. And since then, I've seen that in friends of mine where one person of the couple is like, "Oh, we're going to work this out. Come on, come on, come on." And the other one is just gone, like just gone. It's never going to work. And so there is a line like that. But going back to Gottman, if your allies or your enemies, are you going to work through this or not? I think everybody does end up with those stories if they make it. Look what we worked through. And I think part of our success was the fact that I was never going to let my marriage end for the reasons it was being threatened. It was superficial worldview stuff that I thought this shit isn't even real. Like, this shit isn't even fucking real. I'm not going to let it split apart a family with 4 kids when it's not even, part of the fabric of reality. And so I was just committed to hanging in there. And then we were at the time of our lives where our kids were getting older. We could reconnect, we could spend more time together. And there was a therapeutic drug story with MDMA I could insert because I think it's absolutely part of the equation. But
If
now
you're
that we're
open to
empty
inserting it, it
nesters,
would be useful.
okay, well, so here's it. Here it is. Okay. You know what MDMA does. Floods
Right.
the brain, serotonin, oxytocin, dopamine, right? And Tracy and I were, we were probably in our mid to late 40s before we had done any foreign chemicals like that at all, like even THC, cannabis, anything. And I had done MDMA, I had been on an ayahuasca journey and so forth. And part of our issue, I mean, we each had the issues we brought into the marriage and then collectively had other couple issues. But she was just stoically plugged up. I mean, she was just somebody who could never express emotion. I tell this story. Um, in therapy with you, we were doing individual therapy and couples therapy together. One particular night, she just walked up behind me and hugged me from behind. And I just started laughing. Talk about like the wrong thing to do, because here's a bid for affection. And I just start laughing. So immediately she recoils and is like embarrassed. I'm like, no, 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 I'm sorry. Like, A, I just know this is homework Jeff gave you. B, it's because you haven't touched me in 25 years to initiate any kind of affection. So please go back to the hug thing. That was kind of nice, but pardon my laugh. So at some point, it was literally on our anniversary 10 or 11 or 12 years ago. Somehow I talked her into taking MDMA. I was listening to a podcast about it and I convinced her it was fine. It would be, it's nothing, it's good. So she takes the MDMA and in 15 minutes, she's just face planted on my office floor. And so rightly this time, I kind of snuggled up beside her. And if you know what the effects of MDMA are, she just clung to me like a possum on a branch for dear life, and she sobbed for an hour and just told me how much she loved me, how much she loved her family, how much she loved our kids, and she never wanted anything different. And just all of this shit came out that had been stuck for 25 years. So here's this neurochemical response, and most people will say you're never the same. And I would argue it's probably a mix of both neurochemistry, all these synapses, neurons connecting that have never connected before. But also, once you've expressed something like that so freely, I mean, it's out. And like you feel now more authentic to do it again, to have those deeper conversations. So she just became a closer, more open person, all because of MDMA. But I knew it was in there. I knew she wanted to express it and just couldn't. So we had a lot of things going for us. We had the therapy, we had the commitment, we had our lives, moving on together, and we were both on that trajectory of actually making it work. And then that happened, and it never went back to before.
And it's like I don't know that I don't think knowing your wife and knowing the earnest effort that she was putting into it. It wasn't like this willful, like, nope, I'm just going to stay plugged. It's like, not that Tracy would have said this, but I literally don't know what the fuck you people are talking about. Like, and it's like, and I love hearing that story because it just is the beauty of, the catalyst that she needed. And it's like this the in uses like this, it's this fucking miracle drug,
It is.
especially in the times that we live in of such distraction and high pace and ultra competitive and everything else. And it's like it's just this almost miraculous reset. But we should definitely make that shit illegal.
Well, so there are now therapeutic uses. It's being studied in universities and medical schools, and specifically for things like criminal recidivism, as well as psilocybin and PTSD. All kinds of things they're finding uses for. So I'm very, very confident that in the next 10 or so years, we'll certainly need a new FDA and HHS department. But soon, like you will have therapeutic license to do these things as you already
Thank you,
do
Grunder, on that. What's your fucking, no, we're not. We're not, Joe.
You think that's never going to happen?
We've been fucking around with this for, especially psilocybin. I mean, the effects of psilocybin on substance abuse, alcoholism in particular, the research is, it's gravity. It's like, what are you fucking doing? And
So
we,
at least in Europe, you can go to Europe and do it probably soon.
that is probably, that's very plausible for most of our listeners to go to Europe and do the
I
round.
mean, you got a lot of incentive to start making a move pretty soon. I will say that.
It's like, come on, what are we doing here? And I don't, anyway, I don't want to digress onto that, but it's like, that was a beautiful catalytic event that I would say was imperative to you guys
Totally.
and just so beautiful to see.
And so the question is, can that be reproduced simply therapeutically with the help of counseling and education and time and experience?
The question is, first and foremost, a question of efficiency, right? And it's like, if you have something that is so profoundly catalytic, what why are we fucking around? Let's go, man. I mean, because these things have implications, right? Because you're going to have the rocking chairs and your grandkids are going to get grandma and grandpa or whatever. What, I don't know what they call you. What are you guys' names? You got cutesy names?
Yeah, classic grandpa and grandma. I didn't want any of those
That's solid. No,
ridiculous
you can't
names.
go wrong with that. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
that's fucking beautiful. And as you age, that becomes more and more meaningful to you. It's, in the midst of being frustrated and thinking, I don't give a shit if I'm sitting on the same porch sharing our grandkids. I mean, that's a priceless experience.
So
And
let me ask you this, because this in our first episode in the series, are marriages even useful any longer? Can they work? There are many people professionally who say we just may not want it any longer as an institution. And I'll give you two examples. As a business owner, I already understood reciprocity and mutual incentive. So I never had any of my professional employees sign non-competes or NDAs. I always said, look, I want you to be here because you want to be here. And I will keep you if you are an asset to the organization. And so your only job is to be indispensable. And my job is to give you the freedom to be indispensable and to feel like you can build and nurture your own career here. And so you leave anytime you want, and you also need to know I'm going to replace you anytime I want. So let's just make this work. I view marriage that way. There's nothing more tethering than just knowing you both want to be there with some kind of, you know, you know, equality of need and desire together. And so interestingly, just to tie a bow on the occupational analogy, I recently, even though I've been planning this for more than a decade, I recently started transitioning ownership and management of my business to my staff because at this stage of life, I still wanted a new challenge. I wanted to do something different while I still had the years when, especially through executive experience, I could employ them well. So 6 weeks ago, I took a job as the resource development officer of a nonprofit, our regional food bank. And I'm a guy who doesn't need this job. I could literally walk out anytime I want. I could go get a job paying me 5 times as much if I wanted. So I'm there because I want to be there. And they're investing all of this into me, the resources, the education, because I didn't bring any nonprofit experience. I brought tons of entrepreneurial experience. So they're investing all of this and they like what I'm doing. They see me as highly effective. So now they have the pressure to say, well, we don't want Joe to leave. So what can we do to make him want to stay? And I want to stay. I love what I'm doing there. So am I finding the niche in this area and the nurturing part of what I just described. So you just want that mutual beneficial relationship where people want to be there. And I guess going back to Gottman, when you get entangled into enough conflict in a marriage and you have children and you have social expectations, sometimes you have a lot of ties together that just feel constrained rather than I have the freedom to be here because I want to. Is that meaningful to you as a therapist?
Yes. And I would, there's how to navigate that one. And I've given that a lot of thought. It's like, what do we just stop legal marriage? Like what, how is that? How do we recreate that in the marital relationship? Um, yeah, I've kicked around some ideas. I don't know that I've landed on anything particular. I think there's two things that I think I could more readily be adjusted that would have a more significant impact, maybe, except maybe all of us just have to fucking learn things the hard way. The expectations of marriage, like there has to be, and I preach this as often as I possibly can. Have realistic expectations of your marriage. And you don't. This, the way that you described it of, you're my best friend and you're super hot and you're an awesome parent and it's like, and we're just gonna hang out every night and it's like, it's fucking absurd. Like, recognize the absurdity of that and begin to create space for each other. A certain number of nights a week, she gets to be out a certain number. I don't fucking know. I can describe a principle, but you two got to do the legwork and figure out what the right balance of that is. We're so fucking short term. I mean, we're just so instant gratification. And it's like, I'm sorry that your marriage sucks right now. It hasn't sucked forever, or you wouldn't have got married. I mean, come on, man. Like, and just, there's only one way to get the payoff that you and Tracy are getting right now, and that's to do the motherfucking work. And sometimes it just sucks. And sometimes it feels like it's not making a difference. And sometimes it feels like it's not worth it. And until it is. And there's not a goddamn thing on this planet that's worth having that is easy to get. And a healthy, strong relationship is in that. If you want to be fit, you got to do the motherfucking work. If you want to build a business, you got to do the motherfucking work. If you want a healthy relationship, you got to do the work.
I have seen the parallels. Anybody who makes it to the end and they are still married, we all have these stories of how it almost fell apart and now we're better, we're stronger, we love each other even more. And yet you see the people who didn't make it and you say, yeah, I can justify that. Like maybe they weren't good together, whatever. But then you always wonder, well, what if they just did? Like, what if they had made it? And now they get the kind of bliss that other long-term relationships have. I'm going to come back to the biology for just a second. So many people will not know this, but you look out into all the species in the animal kingdom, and some are pair bonding and some are not. And human beings are obviously pair bonding, except I'm not sure if they understand. There is one genetic mutation on the vasopressin neurochemical receptor that makes some human beings not pair bonding. Or maybe we were not pair bonding and that genetic mutation made some of us pair bonding, meaning some people really do want to stay in a state of fidelity and mutual nurturing. And when you're married for 30, 40, 50 years, and there's all kinds of opportunity to not. But one time I heard you say somebody who has an affair or cheats, like that can be a mistake. It can be all these pressures within marriage and without that did this. But then some people are just sluts. I mean, they're just going to go fuck anything they want whenever they want if they get the chance. And I think that's a perfect illustration of the genes that we have or we don't. And I can even see that expressed in personality psychology. Um, it is remarkably specific because you and I both have friends, and at our ages, some of them still talk like they're in middle school and literally behave that way, and they have the desires that they had when they were 12 years old. And other people grew up and are mature and they have their family or whatever. Uh, do you see, or maybe it's not even in your scope of practice, to really think of the biological differences neurochemically,
No. I process them more just
behaviorally?
yes, just behaviorally. Yeah.
Cognitive behavioral therapy, I think that has to be any therapist's home base,
Right.
maybe with the understanding of the biological nuances, but you're here with a therapist to make change. So if you don't believe you can make change, then you don't have a therapeutic practice.
Correct.
So, and I also agree that people who have a genetic challenge or nuance or mutation that causes them to think and act a certain way, you can still change that. You can restrain it. It's like changing anything in your personality. This is your default. You got to be more careful than others. You have to layer in all kinds of work and habitual nuance, but it's still worth the effort because ultimately we do have a neocortex that can override the brainstem.
No matter how hard no matter how much effort we have to exert, and sometimes it's a lot of fucking effort.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd love to drink bourbon every day. It will fuck my life up beyond recognition in a heartbeat. Uh, I cannot even if I resist if I don't resist, well, I don't even know now because it's like it just the insanity that ensues, and it's like and so then I have a decision that I have to make. Risk reward. Do I love it? Fucking love it. Do I love getting fucked up on bourbon? Fucking love it. Until I open my eyes and think, holy shit, what what carnage have I created?
So we're gonna come down on the essence of this conversation. Is marriage still worth it? Can it work? Thumbs up or down?
I think it's more important than it has ever been. I think we are we are in a society that bombards us with constant distraction and constant uncertainty. And I think the emotional connection of I will always have your back and you will always have my back is as important as it has ever been if you want a meaningful life at the end. If you want to do whatever fun fucking thing you want to do every goddamn day and trade around and everything else, I think there's a shelf life on that. And I think when you get to a point in life, and I'll tell you, buddy, you've experienced this and I've seen it, grandkids are legacy stuff. Life, when you see your grandchildren, life changes. And I personally think it is if you want at your final moments to think that was a satisfying life, I think it's more important than it has ever been.
And so for those who find themselves divorced or maybe in the second half of life and never been married, um, you think it's as important or more important than ever, as you said, to find somebody and say, let's be partners. Let's create this
Um,
life together.
I mean, I can tell you that from personally, It's like even now, my kids are going through milestones. My son just graduated from college, saw my ex-wife. There's that little twinge that what if we would have worked a little bit harder? Oldest just got engaged, you know. It's just when I walk her down the aisle, it's going to be different. It's like we're two people that had a child together. There's a limit to which we can fully celebrate that together. And that is still, do I have doubts, on the daily? No. I mean, I knew, but I'm not impervious to those moments that are like, what if I would have just tried? And it's different now. If I had, in all candor, if I had a magic pill that could fix something,
I did.
I didn't, I didn't know. Um, I mean, that it just, and I'll point to those little miracles that run up to you and say, Grandpa. And the fact that you and Tracy get to hold hands and say, we did this. There's there there is meaning in that transcends suffering.
So let me tell you this little story since you brought up grandkids. You brought it back to me. In writing school, I did my master's thesis on this book on the intergenerational impact of parenting. I mentioned that in a previous podcast. And the interesting thing is, my father, whose own dad left before he was ever born, he never knew him. He didn't have a father. We talked about that. And so he just had to rely on a father figure. And then he has a great nuclear family. Well, I shouldn't say great, but he has a nuclear family. And I love my dad, and we had a great relationship. And then I had my kids, and my kids and I have a great relationship. My first grandchild is a grandson who they are not together. My daughter and his father are not together. They tried, it just didn't work. And so now I am a father figure to my grandson. That's why we're so close. I see him probably every other day, hours and hours a week. At one point, just maybe a year or so ago, so he was 3 years old, we are playing, and without even looking up from the toys, he said, "Do you know who my grandfather is?" I don't stop me if I told you the story in the podcast, okay? And I said, and I thought he was joking because I thought it was going to be so cute, like me. Like, I'm your grandpa. We're best friends. And he said, Dom. And that's his dad's name. I said, Dom is your grandfather? He goes, yeah. And he's still looking down, won't even look up. He said, do you know who my dad is? I said, who's your dad? You. In his 3-year-old mind, he was distraught enough and heavy enough with the gravity of what he was saying. He couldn't even look into my eyes and say it with any glibness. It was a super heavy moment. And he knew you only get one dad. So he had to move his dad out of that position to make room for me to be his dad. And that is one of the most heart wrenching, heartbreaking moments, even though I should feel joy that my grandson loves me that much. It's just fucking retching that he feels so heavy that he already knew at 3 years old his dad wasn't present enough. His dad wasn't adequate enough. His dad wasn't a true father because he already has friends and cousins and etc. that do have a different relationship. So to your point earlier that maybe nowadays kids it's not even a stigma, they're fine. They're not. They're not fine. They feel it. They right from the fucking beginning they feel it. So I'm not going to talk about traditional marriage as a must and you can't have all these different versions. But there is something very unique about the way nature has provided that structure for countless millennia. And it's just what's ingrained in our DNA.
Yes, I concur wholeheartedly.
So it's worth fighting for, is what you're telling me.
Uh, 100%. And in the subsequent episodes, we'll teach them how to fight for it.
All right, man. Thank you so much. And you guys watching, listening, human again, we want you to live the greatest human experience you could have. We believe you have countless, infinite generations of potential ready to unleash. And that's what I have Jeff Stucke here to do. So thank you, friend, and I'll see you next time.